Hi there. In this video, we're going to continue looking at user functions inside of Power Query, and more specifically, we're going to look at user functions that have multiple steps. To start off with, we're in user functions multi-step.xosx. We're in the function concept sheet, and here's the data we're going to work with. So this is sort of a blast from the past. This is something we've already done. We've got all our different stores. We've got the number of club members for each store, and we want to calculate a target for next year. Our formula last time was very, very simple. We just took the number this year and we doubled it. Now we're going to do something a bit more complicated. We're going to double it and then we're going to add 100. Okay, so you would never actually use a formula like this to generate a target, or I don't think that you would. And even if you did, you could also define this in a single step in a function. That would be pretty easy. But we're going to do multiple steps just so you can see how it works. So I'm intentionally keeping the formula very simple so you could focus on the concept rather than sort of the business logic. Okay, so again, what we're going to do is we're going to take the current number, we're going to double it, and then we're going to add 100, okay? So we could do that in one step, we're going to do it in two. So we're going to click on our data, we're going to head up to Power Query, we're going to get our data from a table. Okay, so let's go ahead and define our function. We're going to head into View, we're going to head into the Advanced Editor, okay? So I want to hit Enter, I'm going to define my function up here at the top, that's where I always like to do it. So we're going to call this target for now. Well, that's just what we're going to call it. Okay, so this is a function. We're going to say, well, what arguments go into this function? What arguments go into this magical black box? We're going to call it current number. In fact, we'll just call it current. So we're only going to pass in one argument, and it's just the current number of members, or whatever, the current number. Okay, so before we did something like current times 2, and we called it good, right? So we took the number from the magical black box, we pass in the current number, we multiply it by 2, and then we're done. Well, we're going to break this up into multiple steps, and to do that, it's fairly straightforward. So we're going to come here, and I'm going to delete this comma just so we don't get ahead of ourselves. So we could do this in any number of ways. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a let. I'm going to come down here and do an in. Now, if you've been watching these videos, you might have noticed that in our function there's a let and there's an in. So the let, we define a bunch of processes, we define a bunch of steps, and then the in, we choose which one of these steps we actually return. And we could do that. We could have a let in within a let in. So our function is going to have multiple steps, right? So the way our function works, let me make sure I got that right. 1, 2, 3, 4. The way our function works is we're going to pass in the current number, and we're going to perform a couple steps to it, and we're going to return the last step, and that's going to be the answer. So I'm going to call this first step, or first process, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so what do we do for the first process? Well, we take the arg current, we take the current number, and we multiply it by 2. Add a comma, that's it for the first step. Okay, return, get our spacing right, and the second step is we take the first step, we take the results from the first step, or first dubstep apparently, first step, there we go, and we add 100 to it, okay? And again, for the last step, just like down here, there's no comma, I mean, there's a comma there, but there's no comma there. We don't have a comma for our very last step. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to say 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now that we've got our steps defined, what's the thing that we actually return when we're all done? We're going to return the results from the second step. Okay, I'm going to add a comma. Okay, so we've named our function. It's called function target. We pass in one argument called arg current, or the current number. You can call it whatever you want to. Okay, what do we do? Well, we're going to do a couple different things. For the first step, we're going to take the arg current number that gets passed into the function. We're going to multiply it by 2. We're going to store those results in first step. In the second step, we're going to take those results from the first step. We're going to add 100 to it, store that in the second step. And finally, when we're all done, we're going to take the second step and return it to whoever called the function. So this is going to be the answer. Okay, that's the answer. So I'm going to go ahead and click Done. Should be good. Okay, so now I'm going to head over to Add Column, and I'm going to add a custom column. All right, I'm going to move this down here. So we're going to call our function. Our function is named function FNC target for function target. FNC target, and we can call this whatever we want to. We can call this target members next year. Okay, and I did that kind of backwards. Okay, so let me start over like I'm writing the formula from scratch. Just forget that last thing. So okay, so I've named my column. I'm gonna call my function target. And what do I pass into that function? Well, there's only one argument, and I'm gonna pass in the members from this year, number of members from this year. I close parentheses to close out the function, and I click enter. And there we go. So if you want to get a calculator out, you can test this. But the way the function worked is it took this number, it multiplied it by 2, and then it added 100, just like we defined it. Just like we defined it here, right? So we take a number, arg current, pass it in here, multiply it by 2, store it there. We pull it out, take the results there, add 100, store it in the second step, and return the results of the second step. And it is just that simple. So again, you could very easily do this in a single step, but I think this is a nice way to see how you can define multi-step user functions inside of Power Query. Okay, well, I do hope that was helpful, and I will see you next video.